Welcome to the Limitless Athlete Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, the founder of Mindset Rx'd and your host. Today, I'm going to be sharing my appearance on FitBodySecrets podcast. This is a podcast I recorded with one of our athletes who is 4 months through her 6-month mindset transformation with me, and her name is Cheryl. And Cheryl is a 5 times CrossFit Games athlete who was looking to upgrade her mindset. The reason I'm sharing this podcast is, despite it going out on FitBodySecrets, I wanted to give it a really wide platform because it was a really good conversation with Cheryl. Cheryl asked some great questions, and she's also got an insight into how I work and kind of back up what I'm talking about with some experience and personal journey. So without further ado, here is a collab episode between Limitless Athlete podcast and FitBodySecrets.
All right, Tom, I am super excited to be doing this with you. So this is my At the Whiteboard series, and you have been helping me a ton with mindset, and I'm just so grateful for you. And I wanted to bring you on here to talk to the other people in the community that I think that you would really be able to help out a little bit. And I want to kind of just start by honestly asking you, how did you get into the mindset coaching and the whole, I actually have never asked you that.
Yeah, no, it's a funny one because the more I think about it, the more it's kind of like ingrained into who I really am and my natural inclination. I've always been interested by why we do the things we do. And I suppose that really came to a head or like really started to be intense as an interest when I was being really bullied at school. So I had a pretty crappy time at school. They kind of was not in a good place, and I got really anxious about everything that's happening to me. I was beaten up on the way to school, on the way back, at lunchtimes. Like, it was physical, emotional, and I didn't feel like I could ask for help from anyone. So all this was like a lot of mindset issues as a kid, and this all developed into a heart condition. I now can see the link between the emotional and the physical. I basically got super anxious and my heart started freaking out. They temporarily diagnosed me with something called sudden death syndrome, which is pretty scary for my parents to get a diagnosis of that for their child, and probably scary for me too. But I didn't really process it because it was just normal for me because it's my life. And anyway, that was me for a long time. I was anxious, scared, worried, skinny, no confidence at all, no self-belief, always fearful. And then I got introduced to 2 things. One of them was the Royal Marines Commandos, which is an elite arm of the British military. And another one was a book called Bounce by Matthew Syed. And that book, it introduced the 10,000 hour rule. And the first one I'd ever heard of it. And it switched a piece in my mind of, oh, maybe I can change who I am. And I was tempted to do psychology at university and at 6th form. But ironically, I didn't believe I'd be good enough to do it. And I didn't believe I'd be smart enough. So I didn't. And then I found my way into this area anyway, through my own journey, like learning about mindset, learning about my own limitations, overcoming them, and also mentorship with a sports psychologist and a counselor, and learning their system. And then having conversations with athletes, because I was personal training and in the Royal Marines at the time. And I learned that the conversations I was having with athletes were just as important, if not more important, than the here go sets and reps, because the change thereafter, they're after connection, which is what we're all after, to be seen, heard, listened to, understood, loved, essentially. And then mindset growth was the other thing they were looking for, to overcome their beliefs, like who they believed they were. And then somehow that ends up in Mindset Rx'd.
Yeah, I just literally was like, I can't believe I have never asked you that question, because for somebody who, I wasn't quote unquote bullied. I was bullied, but in different ways, more emotional, more verbal. And as a young adult, I developed the eating disorder. And, I often have spoken to people about, I don't, people are like, do you still go to therapy? And honestly, I don't get nearly as much out of therapy when I went to therapy than I've ever gotten out of what I get with you.
Mm.
Because, and I'm saying that with 100%, I've told people that, because the connection is different. The understanding is a different level. Whereas a lot of times when I was in therapy, everything was just so like cookie cutter. And it was like, very, like, let's draw a picture. And I was artistic in a lot of ways and that, but it just never really got down to. Now that I get a better understanding about where my habits or where my actions were coming from, absolutely understanding the psychology about eating disorders and stuff was really important for me. But what I've gotten with you is different. And as an athlete now where I'm at in my life, a lot of those beliefs that I had as a child, just like I'm sure you still experience with being bullied, is like they're like don't go away. They manifest themselves into how we handle life now. And I think that in a lot of ways, people don't take the time to really think about how
Mm,
our past shapes our future and how our beliefs become our reality. And I think for, I talk all about the stories in our heads, and I know those things, but I myself was very resilient to writing things down. And, you have really gotten me into a better place where I can actually take time to journal. So a lot of the people out here are probably like, what is mindset coaching? What is mindset RX? What is your main focus with the people that you work with?
mm. Really nice. Before I get to that, I just want to jump back to one thing that you said, which is really
Yeah.
interesting. You mentioned about experiencing more change in the work that we're doing than therapy, and like, and I'm not just saying that because it sounds really good for us and what we do. It's interesting as a topic because, well, why is that? Like, why is that? One level, I think, is because mindset is a one size fits one solution. Like, there's principles and kind of values that carry along, but I think the more important thing is what else you're talking about there, which is those beliefs we have as a child, which are usually where coping strategies are ingrained into us. They come about through two things: repetition and emotion. So they're emotionally salient because they're so painful, whatever that is, whether it's not being seen and loved as a child, whether it's bullying, whether it's like whatever it is for you, whether it's not feeling good enough. And they're repeated. Like for me, it's repeated pretty much daily, multiple times. So what that says is that they're really ingrained, but also how do we change that? How do we make the change? It's repetition and emotion. And we do that through like calls, like you and I have been having calls, and they're very useful. But the real work comes in sitting down on a daily basis or pretty much daily and training our mindset, putting in the sets and the reps. So that's where the real growth comes from. Like that's the reps, that's the work. Like you wouldn't expect to get physically fitter with 30-minute training session a week, but if you put the reps in 7 days a week or multiple times throughout the week, then that's where you get the growth.
And I think you've actually mentioned to me, it's just the word, the quote that comes to my head is like changing the narrative.
Mm,
We are literally writing a new story. And something that I love is AMWAP, as many wins as possible. I mean, those when I see that on my journal and prompt, I'm like, ooh, I get to write things down. And at first, I remember how hard that was for me. I think I remember my first one was like, I can't think of anything positive, and because I was just in such a negative place. And it's been so awesome to be able to, even in the worst days, to be able to say, where can I find the positive in this situation? And so I love that whole change of the narrative thing. So yeah, I love that. I'm glad that you added that on. So I guess I could talk about it, but I want you to talk about it. What do you typically do with the people that you work with mindset? What do you think is so different about what you do versus like therapy? And I can go into what I think is different because I'm in the same way as a nutrition coach. Why am I different than an RD or a registered dietitian? There's a lot of things that are different, so what
mm.
do you think is so different?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I think the fact that we come at it from an athlete centric perspective. Obviously, you're a human before you're an athlete, but additionally, like I understand what's happening with you as an athlete. I understand the pressures. I've worked with athletes from all areas of life, and we have like our coaches have as well from like all levels of competition. So I think that's a big one because like lots of people come to us and they're like, you know what, like I've spoken to a therapist about this, or I've had counseling, or I've tried journaling, but it doesn't translate to the gym, and it doesn't translate to competition, it doesn't translate to my actual performance. And they've tried sports psychologists, but it's like kind of it's a bit too specific almost. It's like they want an overarching like an overlap between the two areas, and that's where we really focus on. Like we're training the human and the athlete at the same time. And I think that's what's very different. And then the fact that you're submitting your mindset training to me every day and you're doing the work and then sending it to me and I'm analyzing it, that's very different from like jumping into a therapy session once a week or twice a week and kind of catching the therapist up and explaining where you're at to. And then also, I suppose the other side, whilst we're training mindset, what we're not dealing with is mental illness to the point of disorder. We're somewhere in the middle. We're kind of like, if the CrossFit health to fitness and disease continuum was where we're at, we're kind of in the middle to the top, not right at the bottom from starting out. So yeah, I think that's a few of the differences. And what I'd be interested to know what you think.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the main differences, that, and I think that just like the more connection. I love that you never tell me what to do. It's, as much as sometimes I wish you would, it's, well, what do you think? It's actually helping me to, it empowers me. And that's with me. And one of the things I talk about my clients about is like, I want to empower you to be the leader of your life. I don't want to tell you what to do. I want you to be empowered with that. And you definitely have really helped me with that. I think that the main thing today is, as I want to really make sure that the listeners can understand, is that mindset coaching isn't reserved for just the top level athletes, and that there's kind of going to be two populations of people that are going to be hearing this. There's going to be the top level athletes, or even the semifinals, quarterfinals, open, and they're trying to take it to the next step. But there's also going to be the Gen Pop, the people that are going to the gym because they want to get healthy, they want to get fit. And both of those types of populations have mindset blocks. And a lot of it is they don't even, they actually, and I think I put myself in, we blame ourselves. We think that it's just, oh, we're the ones that we can't make the commitments, we can't do the little things, we don't put the attention to detail, we're too stuck in our ways to make changes. And I want to talk a little bit about how mindset coaching can really help drive for both of those populations. One, performance improvements by dialing in the mindset, and two, driving those habit changes that people are so resilient to be able to make. And maybe you can give some quick tips for maybe both of those populations and what you might recommend to kind of get started with mindset on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with the kind of the high-end athletes and the people aiming at being an elite athlete, and then work our way into the different camp. So high-end athletes, they're essentially putting way too much pressure on themselves. They're forcing success. They've lost all the fun and adventure and excitement from training. And they find that they just hit this kind of limitation. And that limitation is where their beliefs run out of being useful. Essentially, we develop beliefs to help us cope in the world. And those are essentially what we refer to as coping mechanisms or coping strategies. And they work as a really good way to get us out of pain until they stop working and we can't go any further. And then we find we hit this glass ceiling that we can't quite break through. What we need to do then is release ourselves from the beliefs. And we can do this through two ways. One of them is there's actually three ways in this. Regulation of your nervous system. Like, all of us athletes know that we've got to recover better. We've got to feel better. If we feel like crap, we're not going to perform well. The next one is looking at our story that we believe and getting rid of those beliefs that have limited us. And maybe we've learned to believe that we're always second best, or we're always being compared to somewhere else, or or someone else. Or maybe we've learned to believe that we'll get socially rejected if we display authenticity. Like, that's our limiting belief. And if we don't change that, we're going to run into limitations over again. So removing that belief, and then performance-based as well. Like, how are we going to optimize our performance? My favorite tool for this and helping athletes optimize their performance is thinking about the character skills that we want to develop as athletes. Now, as athletes, we especially in the CrossFit space, we think a lot about like forcing, pushing, aggression, discipline, willpower, and those are great. They're really important, but they only work when they're balanced out with things like self-compassion and patience, and those more kind of archetypically feminine traits. So kind of soft and more gentle to yourself. So we've got to learn to display those in workouts. And where I start with pretty much every athlete is, what is the character skill that you need to work on most? What's the one that's going to give you the biggest benefit? And give me exactly one way that you're going to display that in a workout today or in your training today. So maybe it is, I'm going to develop the character skill of full commitment. And I'm going to do that by fully driving and fully committing in my jerks. And that's it. In my first set of jerks, be very specific. So we can work on that, and we can do the same with like self-compassion and patience and observation and all these kind of character skills that you want to display. And then if we go to general population, is that
I want to
gone?
start before I just want to tell you that without even knowing that's what you did, it's, you know, as somebody that's working with you right now, it's crazy how I am now seeing this, is that I go into a session now and I'm like, today I'm going to practice gratitude for everything that my body has shown me. I'm going to do that by giving it, you know, the opportunity to not have to feel the pressure of pushing hard, and knowing that there's days where you'll see in my thing where I'm like, today I'm going to be a pit bull. And I literally want to fight. Like, I don't even want to think. I just want to go dark and not care about the pain. Like, and like developing those character traits is so cool. And giving the listeners a little bit of feedback on how that's helped me is that my training has become more productive because I'm not always trying to be the pit bull. I'm not always trying to be that person. I'm sometimes saying, hey, today I'm going to practice being, you know, the mindful athlete. And, you know, how well am I hitting the standards of these movements? And how well am I executing this? How many times did I have to chalk? It's just, I wanted to just shift, because as an athlete myself, I don't think people understand how important taking the time to think about these things can totally change what you get out of a session and what you get out of your training. So I just wanted to quickly talk on that. Now you can go into
Yeah,
pop.
thanks for sharing that, because it makes it more like I can talk about it from a theoretical point of view in my own experience, but like you giving color to that really helps. And I think the reason why that works is because you're training two things at once. You're actively, intentionally training your mind and your character instead of just hoping that it happens. Like we do this too often in CrossFit, and the fact is that we initially get some huge gains in terms of mindset because we start to overcome these beliefs, but that runs out very quickly, like around 2 years in typically, and our character then stays the same unless we intentionally train it. So that's like by going into a session saying like, I'm not only training the physical aspect and giving myself these performance objectives within this, but I'm giving myself mindset objectives too. That is stretching you and giving you something to aim at and giving you a kind of a barometer of success that you can use to record instead of just, oh, I am who I am and I can't change that.
And it helps us control our emotions, because,
yes,
you know, the reason with top end athletes is that we truly care about being the best. And that can become a very emotional state. And when we're acting on emotions, and I had this yesterday, I have a broke foot right now. And I went into my session and I was like, I'll just work on upper body. I was trying to be the guy, you know what? Opportunity, Cheryl. Like, you can really get better at ring muscle ups today. And then my ring muscle ups felt like shit. So then I'm like, oh, woe is me. And I started finding myself going in this negative. I'm like, no, like, you can change this right now. All that emotion is not going to do you any good, you know. And so it allows you to be more in the moment. So I just wrote it. I think it's really important for people. And this is for all athletes, not just the top games athletes. The top games athletes do this really, really well, but it's a trickling down effect that they had to start somewhere. And no matter what your end goal is, taking this time is important. And I just really want to emphasize that before I moved on to Gen Pop. So
absolutely.
now you go to Gen Pop. Yeah.
Okay. And to add to that again, and then I will get to Gen Pop.
Yeah.
The best athletes in the world, sometimes they're the worst people to look to for mindset advice because they don't know or they consider normal the reasons that they got to where they are. Like we're also subconsciously conditioned the whole way through our lives, and we regard that as normal. And we generate these beliefs. These beliefs create our reality through. That sounds very mystical and woo-woo, but like let's break that down quickly. Our beliefs create our reality by affecting our thoughts and emotions, which affect our behaviors, and that creates our success or lack thereof. And that's what great athletes do. They have these beliefs that facilitate the behaviors which create success, and they've never questioned them, never created them. And like that is, or they have, but it's been kind of unintentional and they've arrived to where they are. But most people, like the people who are best to learn from are the people who have gone from, who weren't great performers, and then they've worked their way up because they've had to systematically change their mindset. Now, let's go to Gen Pop before I forget.
And it's honestly, it's the same. It's just really a different goal, right? These people are maybe not looking to compete at the top level of their sport, but they're looking at their body and their health, and they're like, I just can't break these barriers. And it's coming down to these beliefs. I can't seem to make these commitments, these habit changes. And I'm trying to get more consistent with my nutrition, or, trying to, do these different things. And I will tell you this, that one of the biggest pitfalls I find with general pop, and when I speak to general pop guys, I'm talking about anybody out there that's going to the gym because they want to be fit and healthy. They don't necessarily have this high achieving goal in terms of competition or sport. They just really want to feel and look better. One of the biggest limiters I find is that people are always looking for instant gratifications. And this is where people in Gen Pop are very different than athletes, because most athletes are often very committed to the process. They understand that. Gen Pop, they are very much about like, give me results today. They like want everything now, for whatever beliefs they have in their brain about how things happen. But I want to kind of talk to, I guess this population where it's like, hey, I want to make these changes in my life, but I'm not ever committing to anything long enough to see those changes.
So again, it's 3 steps. The nervous system regulation piece is key, but let's not overcomplicate that, because usually with general population, the wins are much easier to get. So let's just start with sleep hygiene and make sure we're getting enough high quality sleep. Let's limit our screen time. Let's get outside early. Let's hydrate really well and eat some real food. Let's start there and not over caffeinate. Let's start there and just build, and we can build from that into breath work and cold exposure and stuff if needed. But usually the wins are much kind of easier and more simple, and we can doing them consistently results to huge amounts of change. So we can start there, but the big 2 are the kind of the rewiring piece. Actually, that's probably the big one here. Performance is kind of important, but it's not the be all and end all. So rewiring the narrative. How do we do this? We test. We've got to figure out what that narrative is. What is the belief that we have? And we do that through some journaling, writing down our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations, bring them to the surface so we can start to identify the belief. So just get out and journal, begin writing. That's this most simple way to do it, not judging what goes down, not judging the quantity, the quality, how crazy we feel when we're writing, when we see our thoughts come out and we're like, oh, I didn't realize that was really what I'm thinking. Just get it out onto paper and just begin to observe and ask yourself the question, what would someone who thinks this believe? And that's a good question to think when you're looking through your journaling. Then creating a vision, like what does success look like to you? Really, what is a 3-year vision of success? What's a 5-year vision of success? What is the best version of you look and feel like? And then we've got that emotion starting to go. And then from there, presence, focusing on now instead of the future. So what can we do to focus us on now? And then proof, you talked about it as already, AMWAP, as many wins as possible. And that's probably the tool that has the biggest shifts in general population mindset immediately. Just taking 3 to 5 minutes at the end of each day, writing down everything that you did that takes you closer towards being the person that you want to be. And it's process-based, not outcome-based. That's the key there. So I trained today. I ate within 5% of my macros. I hydrated well. I implemented some sleep protocols, whatever it is. I had a nice conversation with my partner. I went outside for a walk. Whatever these things are that took you closer towards being who you want to be, get them in your journal and start writing about them.
And the main thing that I want to talk about here is, because I'm a nutrition coach, obviously, is that all these things, right? These habit changes, the sleep, the screen time, the hydration, the journaling. Okay. People don't see the value in these things because they've never experienced the value. And, and they expect if they have one good night of sleep that everything's going to come together. And it's really, like you said, it's repetitions. It's the repetitions of those things and being more mindful. And I think that what I definitely want people to get across here is that, myself included, we don't spend enough time training our brain to think. We spend too much time avoiding thinking. Even from this week when I first had my foot injury, you called me out without even telling me. You didn't even know you were calling me out. Don't forget to actually feel the emotions today, Cheryl. Because guess what? I was already looking for ways to not feel what I was feeling. we don't want to take that time to do those things because it feels uncomfortable and we think it's a waste of time. But by taking the time to actually ask yourself what you want, because people don't know what they want. They don't even know. They know they want to lose 20 pounds and they don't even know why they want to lose it. They
Mm.
don't even know why. They just know that right now because they don't think about it. I mean, they think, but they don't actually verbalize it and get themselves to understand. And when you actually realize how all the things that are going on in your life are causing those problems, you become more aware of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're more likely to fix those things. And it's whether you're the top end athlete trying to fix your commitment to your training program and not worrying about what everybody else is doing, or you are somebody in the gym that's just trying to be healthier. You have to understand that. And I don't remember where I heard this, but like the beauty of success is in the freaking chase.
Mm-hmm.
Like people that are successful in life, it's not because they achieved the goal that they're happy. The goal didn't make them happy. You know, they didn't get happy because it's really reflection on the chase. Because usually when they get to that goal, what's next? They want
Mm-hmm.
something else. And those driven minds are just over and over. So it was just why I want to kind of like mention that, because as I was writing these things down, I'm like, yeah, you know, when I tell my clients, hey, do you think you can, you know, like get off the phone like 30 minutes early and maybe try and get a little bit more sleep? Oh, that's the only thing I get to do at night is play on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, well, do you want to sleep better or do you want to play on your phone? Like it's like little things like that that were very resilient to change, you know?
Mm.
So I
And
just
it's
really want
important
to
to
kind of,
note there the discomfort too, because when we think about the gym or even think about work, we're very familiar with the way that discomfort's going to feel. We're like, oh, okay, like, and we can justify that that's a good thing to look at. But this a mental emotional discomfort that is very uncomfortable for us to feel, and we kind of categorize it as bad. But that's the equivalent of, I don't know, the Fran lung in the middle of the workout, or it's the equivalent of doing your awful set of echo bike intervals, or it's the equivalent of going to failure on your chest to bars, like whatever it is, like that mental emotional discomfort of like, oh, I'm uncovering this, and or I'm forcing myself to look at the positives and switching my perspective, or I'm forcing myself and or allowing myself to be present in the moment. And despite the discomfort, like that discomfort is the work that you're doing, and we have to learn to like see that as the process, and that is the
yeah,
kind of, yeah, that's the way to success, by leaning into that discomfort. We had this old slogan, embrace hardship, that we talked about for ages, and everyone always thought it was about like, okay, in the session, like we've even got some patches here, embrace
yeah,
hardship and HFPO, having fun pays off. And those patches, everyone always thought it was about in the workout, just push as hard as you can, absolutely crush yourself. But it's about that, and it's about embrace the hardship of being compassionate to yourself,
yeah.
and embrace the hardship of observing your thoughts without redacting them and judging them. That's the hardship that makes the real changes.
Yeah. Before I kind of go into some of the different things that you do offer with your, I know you have some like free like seminar type stuff. The last thing I had written down is the importance of being intentional in what we do. And kind of like as an athlete, Gen Pop, whatever, that a lot of times like we forget what we're actually trying to achieve. We forget what we're actually trying to do. And I think that with the mindset training, people don't realize how much that can make you more intentional in your actions. You know, we tend to, like I said, I mentioned instant gratification. We're all very impulsive beings, and we kind of just very easily act and don't even realize we're doing something. And then later we pay the consequences from beating ourselves up. And I think with journaling, with mindset, with even going into a session, writing down the character traits, knowing what you're trying to get out of the session, even if you are going into your day, if you can take that same exercise and as a Gen Pop, start your morning off like, what is my intent today? Like, what character trait am I going to portray today? You know, like what kind of a person do I need to be today in my day? Taking that time can set you up for being more intentional and getting more out of every single thing that you do. And I just think that I wanted to kind of just really touch on that a little bit, and how mindset training has really helped me with being more intentional in things, and how people can really get that as well.
That's brilliant. Like I love that you've got to that point, and you're getting to even further beyond that as well, because we spend so much time acting and not enough time thinking about where our actions are taking us. Like no time aiming, but we just act the whole time. And what inevitably happens if we just act is that forms a loop and a pattern of thought and behavior and emotion that we just follow round and round and round and round. Then we're like, oh, why am I stuck? Well, it's because we're not adjusting our aim each day or each training session. And we need to do that. We need to know where we're getting away from. So we need to understand our limiting belief. We need to understand where we're headed to, like what is success, even if it's a vague idea of success at first. Like heading toward that is good, and even if it's away from discomfort, that's better than nothing. Then we need to be present, need to be focused on now, like what am I doing right now? Am I falling into the old trap? And then at the end, it's like proving to yourself that you're doing the right things, reinforcing that, oh, that was a success, that was good, that was bad, that took me towards where I wanted to go, that didn't. And it's just that process over and over and over again. That's what makes people intentional and purposeful and deliberate and effective.
Got it. So what I want to go over now is a kind of like a couple of things that you do offer to the community, so they can kind of like know what they can be looking for. Because honestly, when I found your podcast, I was like diving into, I love that you guys would interview and then kind of do like a recap of the interview. I was really like diving into a lot of that stuff, and I know that I'll make sure they can find your podcast, but what kind of things do you guys do with, I know you have the one-on-one coaching, but I know you also have some group stuff that you kind of put out throughout the year.
Yeah. So where to start? We've got a cool webinar coming up with Khan Porter actually on. I'm not sure when this is going to go up, but it's going up mid-November with Khan, and it's basically how to train your mindset from the start to the finish. Like what do you need to do as an athlete to train your mindset? So that's coming up, but we just switched to working entirely one-to-one. It was like at the beginning of this year, we stopped doing group programs because this is like, it's a personal process. It's a personal environment. And like I was trying to like make the optimal business model. And in fact, I like it a bit messy because it's a human thing. And I like the kind of the connection that we have on our calls. And I like the connection that I have with all of our other athletes and the change that we can create. And it's mindset is a personal thing. It's a one size fits one solution. So we like to be able to adjust that. So all our coaching is currently one-to-one. We do weekly calls or monthly calls. That's it. Those are your two options. You'll still getting fully customized programming. You're still getting daily check-ins from us. But those are your two options. And we might run a coaching certification occasionally for people who want to take it to the next level and learn how to coach mindset. But for now, those are the two options on the personal coaching.
Yeah. And I would 100% think it's going to be awesome. So what I would like to do is I want to leave the audience, and I'm going to put this out there for them, is like, obviously I know how difficult it was. By the way, guys, just so you know, this one subject wide ruled notebook is my first completed journal that I've done in I don't know how long, because I have bought 5 million journals and never finished one. And so if you're that person out there that's like, I've always tried to develop a consistent habit of journaling, I know this is important for me, but never could do it. And I've had a rough patch recently, but I am very proud of myself for the amount of effort I've put into my mindset training, and I am seeing it pay off. In fact, even though I almost had tears yesterday in my session, I haven't cried in a session in a long time. And as an athlete, I would often put a lot of pressure on myself and leave the gym crying. And that would be just miserable. It would just affect my entire day. So I want to kind of leave the audience with some action steps they can take today. And I'm going to put together like a little guide for them. And I'm thinking of like 3 good journal prompts. And I think one is definitely, I want to include AMWAP as part of that. I just think that is so beneficial. And why don't you explain AMWAP? If I don't want to explain, I want you to. AMWAP.
Yeah, perfect. So why this works is because we remember repetition and emotion. That's what changes the connections within our brain. So we need to reinforce the story that we want to believe and that is true. Like that's what we're trying to do here. And it makes us feel good. It makes us feel positive. It makes us realize that we are making progress, and it makes us look back at our day and go, oh, actually, I did do a lot, rather than that one thing I did wrong. There's about 25 things that I did right today. So it's very simple. You can do this in a few ways. Spend 5 minutes, put a timer on 5 minutes, and write down as many wins from the past 24 hours as possible. That's probably the best one. Or from the last week. Give yourself a time frame, maybe 24 hours. What did I do today that took me closer towards my goals? So AMWAP, that's one. Let's go for an observe your inner athlete. And the point of this is to uncover what is holding you back that you haven't realized. So I would just start with my greatest challenge in life is, and then just carry on writing. Just see where that ends up, and just whatever comes up in your mind. This is a game of basically association, free association. Whatever comes up in your mind goes down to paper. Don't judge it, don't redact, don't edit, don't think you're writing for anyone else. You're just writing, you're streaming your consciousness out. That's all you're doing. So you kind of switch off the judgment and just write for 5 minutes and see what comes up there. It's a free exercise, and it works really, really well. And then we can go for a direction review to finish with. And this is very simple. Where do I want to be in 3 years? There's two parts to it. Where do I want to be in 3 years from now? And secondly, what am I going to do in the next 24 hours to take me closer?
I love that. And I think that that's great for everybody. And the cool thing about this, guys, is I'll be honest, is that when you first start, if you're like resistant to like taking the time, it doesn't really take that much time. It doesn't. We overthink it. Just like everything else in nutrition. Oh, I don't have time to plan my meals. No, you have time. You're not making it a priority. And if you are struggling to make progress in your life, in the gym, like taking the time to work with your mental health is 100% only going to bring you benefit. Whether it gets you to your goal or it gets you happier and healthier, it's going to change your life. So, it's something that I definitely full-heartedly believe in. And I'm actually excited for this webinar that you're doing. I love Con Porter, and I love how open he is about his own mental health stuff. So I think that's going to be amazing. So, but thank you for doing this, Tom. Anything last minute to add? I know that they can find you Mindset RX, and then obviously I'll link that in the show notes along with your podcast. I'll put the webinar sign up as well. And anything else you want to add in there?
No, that's all good. One thing I would say is you're very kind, saying that we've helped you. You've done all the work. I want to make that public. Like, you did the work. You changed your mindset. You put the sets and reps in. Like, we might have told you, or I told you, like, this is the way to go, but you did the work.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be honest, guys, just so you all know, there's times like he's going to think I'm crazy because I'm like, I am all over the place. But that's what's so beautiful about this relationship and everything with the brain, is that we are all somewhat crazy in our own ways. So I love it. So thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you.
My absolute pleasure.